Well. It's not very often I have repeat guests on my show, but this time I've got a twofer. I've had both of you on my shows previously. I know you both. And what's funny or somewhat crazy is that both of you have a lot of links and yet didn't know each other until this very moment where we're getting together. So let's start with Lidewij. Lidewij, tell us a little bit of who you are and what are you up to these days?
Thanks, Minter. Yeah, we didn't meet yet, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation with the three of us and explore what we have together. My work's in empathy. I've been working on empathy in psychology for the past more than 20 years. But more recently, I'm also diving into AI. I work at the Hanse University in the north of the Netherlands, where I'm teaching. And one of the teaching projects I'm working on at the moment has to do with AI and how to use AI in applied psychology, which is quite a tricky subject in all sorts of ways, but very, very interesting and very creative. So we've been working on a project with students over the past year where we developed with them ways to use AI, and then we're talking mostly about LLMs, mostly about chatbots, into the development of their studies and their profession. Very interesting work. And so empathy on the one hand and AI on the other. And the fact that I'm really very passionate about empathy and developing empathy, both in terms of theory, but especially also in terms of practice. And so getting my foot in the door, as we psychologists used to say, into how do we, can we, and how do we work with empathy and AI, and can that be beneficial to us as human beings, and can we maybe learn something new about empathy, which is always good because empathy science tends to turn in circles.
Mm, beautiful. And certainly this notion of therapeutic AI and the notion of AI with empathy as an aid or an assistance, if you will, to the need for more therapy because of the lack of enough therapists, human therapists. So deeply interesting, deeply useful. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, so well, first and foremost, thanks for bringing us together here. And yeah, so my background is in AI. So I started to study AI, well, at the end of the 80s, 1989. And that was, yeah, I had both, we all know the memes from Hollywood about robots taking over, but for me, it wasn't just like the fear of AI, it was the fascination with AI as well, because AI is very much something that is about the F of fascination in the sense, it's fascination with ultimately not the AI, but with ourselves. Yeah. And of course, intelligence is one of the key questions around humans, where we think that we are different from animals, etc. I'm not so sure actually whether the difference is that big, but there's other things that make us humans as well. So ultimately, it's a healthy, narcissistic fascination, yeah, with ourselves and with living beings, and also how that can actually extend to non-humans. Yeah, I've been in this area ever since. So I have, one foot in academia. So I'm an assistant professor at Leiden University in the Netherlands, where I study all these things. I call it artificial X, or X, anything that makes us human. And I'm also director of the AI lab of an American software company called Pega, where yeah, empathy is one of the topics, in the sense that we use, well, our clients use AI a lot to have, let's say, meaningful conversations with their customers, right? So how to be relevant in customer interaction and meaningful as well.
Well, what's sort of funny for me, I like to connect dots. I also like to connect people. Is that on the one hand, Peter, you came from AI and you've landed on empathy, or at least humanity. And Lidewij, you started with empathy and you've landed on AI. And both of you in the north of the Netherlands,
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be something else going on. The dots are connecting. Yeah, this idea of how we can learn about ourselves through this machine technology, and what does it tell us about us, why we do what we do, if we try to make it more human, better in customer experiences or whatever type of application. What does it say about us? And I think that's probably what maybe gets all three of us, our juices flowing. So so you, Lidewij, also another thing I wanted to make sure we talk about, which is you were also the co-founder of the Empathy Circle, which is an amazing practice that I've been doing a lot of, and I've always appreciated and always want to credit you for founding that. And both of you being PhDs are both, of course, highly published. So I want to make sure that people who are listening know that we are talking to two ponts, as we say in French, des ponts, of the business. So let me ask, let's say, Peter first, because you talk about this artificial X. And I think it's relevant for us to start by saying, well, what if it's not artificial? What is it that actually makes us human? What is it? What is the X factor that makes us human in your mind?
No, yeah, that's a good question. I think it does, like, to go on a slight tangent. It does, like I said in the intro, it does kind of explain our fascination a little bit with the AI, because I don't think it's indeed just about the artificial. I do think it's about, yeah, us having kind of this healthy narcissistic fascination for what it is, what makes us human, right? So, and that predates, let's say, robots and computers and AI. That, like, we had, Greek philosophers musing about it 2000 years ago, but probably even Neanderthals sitting around a campfire, thinking about all of these things, what are emotions, what is creativity, what is intelligence. Maybe they communicate it in a slightly different way than we do. Yeah, but I think these questions are really, really old. Yeah, so what makes us human? That's a big question. Like, I do want to maybe rule out certain things, and that's another way to attack a definition, is to say, well, certainly it's not just intelligence, right? So, and that may sound like a no-brainer, but when you read a lot of the news and when people talk about AI, it's all about, the robots are becoming superhuman, etc. Well, then I'm thinking two things. One, whatever, Kasparov's already got beaten by a chess computer in the 90s. So that in certain areas, these machines are becoming smarter than us. That doesn't devalue us as humans. The other thing is we're so much more than just chess computers, right? So we're even so much more than just being intelligent. Yeah, we're emotional, we're religious, we're jealous, we're humorous, we are, we fail, we're helpless.
Narcissistic.
Many different things that kind of make us human. And I do think it's interesting to study that through that artificial lens. Not because I think necessarily we're there yet and anything can be expressed by these artificial beings. But I think it's a way, it's a nice way to, like, at the heart, I'm maybe a scientist or researcher, to model it. If we can somehow, yeah, make it artificial, we can try to understand it, model it, try to understand it a bit more, and also try to understand a little bit better what it is, what we don't understand. And I do think it's nice to be open to thinking that, these superhuman qualities could also occur in animals and plants, or maybe in even other things, or at least we project those other qualities on these other things.
It becomes a relevant question in our world where in certain studies, we should say, there are different ideologies, and these ideologies are, one could call, philosophies with a moralistic intention behind it, and wondering whether we can or can't look to nature and animals as part of who we are, or are we separate from them? And then what is our identity, and how do we establish our uniqueness? So Lidewij, I was going to sort of lean on a little bit what Peter said, where Aristotle said that we are rational animals. I tend to think that we are irrational animals. That is our distinction, I think, with animals anyway, rather than the rationality. But where do you lean into this notion of the uniqueness or the specific qualities that make us human?
Mm. Well, while Peter was chatting just now, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, what is there really that is uniquely human to us humans, right? And I mean, if we're taking it from the empathy angle, definitely not. We're not the only ones experience and expressing empathy. Lots of studies showing that many animals have some form of empathy, or experience some form of empathy, and act on those forms of empathy. Consciousness, also not distinctly human. Irrationality, also not distinctly human. We see lots of animals doing very irrational things. Not all the time. There's principles of evolution that maybe can explain these irrational behaviors, but not sure if irrationality or rationality is what makes us human. Actually, I have to admit that I'm really not sure what makes us distinctly human. If there is anything that we really have that the other animals do not have, I'm not sure.
Well, just like consciousness, it's kind of a long debate, hard and soft questions of consciousness, and how do we prove it? I mean, we and animals both have pain, and this becomes a deeply relevant question, Peter, when we start looking at the notions of whether it's unique to humans versus, if it's not unique to humans and animals, then how do you sort of draw the distinction between us and machines?
Yeah, good question. So first and foremost, I think also there's always lots of debates about, let's take the robot example, like when people say, oh, is the robot truly intelligent, truly emotional, truly empathetic? But I think what might be an important insight, it's not so much about whether the other object is truly X, yeah? The other aspect to it is the projection that we have as humans, right? So, yeah, we tend to actually project all these qualities onto others all the time, yeah? So, there's a particular, Daniel Dennett, American philosopher, he has this theory he calls like the intentional stance. Right? So he says like, let's park this whole question whether, intentions, emotions, and thoughts and intelligence are real. Like it's an interesting discussion, but it's a very tough and ill-defined discussion, even if you would limit it to humans, let alone talking about animals, plants, or Teslas, right? But he says like, I'll park that for now. I'll just say from an evolutionary perspective, we actually project those intentions, and because it's useful, it's adding to our evolutionary fitness. Yeah. So if I'm walking through a forest 50,000 years ago, and there's a yellow black striped object, furry, jumping out of a tree and saying "rah," I don't go like, are you a subject or are you an object? No, I run, because I project upon you. You seem like a hungry, a hungry animal or something like that. Let me run. And so we are really hardwired to project all these things, not just intelligence, but also intentions, emotions, desires, feelings onto the other, because that helps us to understand, helps us to understand the world. But with understand the world, I mean to predict what might likely happen and act accordingly. Yeah. So, and that applies to our fellow humans that we interact with, maybe our dog or our cat, but also, when we are in traffic and we see a car driving around, or you know, like, or when our computer stops doing what we want it to do, or then we start to project these things onto these other objects as well. Yeah, so in that sense, it's also, that's another way to say, like, it might actually, it's interesting to talk about whether intentions, emotions, etc. in non-humans are real, but to some extent it doesn't matter, you know. And then it's just parking that whole discussion and is saying we are hardwired to project it onto the other because it helps us to relate, it helps us to interact, it helps us to predict what's going to happen.
So listening to you, Peter, this notion of projection, it reminds me of the discussion. There's a chap called Thomas Telving, a Danish author, who wrote a book called Killing Sophia. And he talks a lot about the idea of anthropomorphizing machines and this projection of who we are into machines. And even if the machine doesn't necessarily feel pain, is it okay to kick a mechanical dog or a humanized robot? And what does that say about our society? And then I wanted to, Lidewij, talk to you and bring that sort of wobble into this idea, because as a psychologist, you're generally not supposed to project yourself into the person in front. I mean, at some level, they're supposed to find their solution in their own world. And so I wonder how you deal with projection in the space of psychology, and where do you fall out in this idea of projection and the anthropomorphization of machines as part of our quest to understand our humanity?
Yeah, it's true that projection is like one of the big stumbling blocks of all sorts of psychological practices. So we're not just talking about therapy, right? We're talking about all human interaction, and there where we start trying to understand other beings, and we do that referencing to our own thoughts, feelings, and past. We start to project ourselves onto the other. And we can see already so far with AI as well that we do the same with AI, right? We start projecting personas onto a chatbot. And so the question of kicking the dogs, actually, the robotic dogs, actually, I think an interesting thing, because it circles back to what Peter was saying about, you know, the big F of fascination with our own selves, right? And so this idea of what does that say about us? Because my first response would be, go kick that robotic dog, you know, please kick the robotic dog instead of the real dog besides, right? All you do is technical damage, probably. Maybe you lose some memory, who knows? But you know, but it's, I think that our projecting ourselves onto animal, other humans, non-humans, it's what we automatically do. And so if that's the automatism, probably you don't need to be a psychologist to become aware of that and to start wondering whether that is really the adaptive response to all that happens around you, right? So having conscious about your own self and taking a bit of distance in order not to immediately project, but to create some more space, open up, and get a feel for what the other has to bring to the conversation or to the experience. Does that answer your question?
Well, it's a continuing, there's no specific answers to these questions, right? I mean, I am certainly not going to judge them, but it makes me think of, you know, you guys, the academics, but the idea of the state of being observed changes the nature of that, of the object being observed. And so there's that projection of us projecting onto it and the impact that that has on the person or the thing that is being observed. It all sounds very woo-woo. And as both of you being academics, a lot of what we're talking about is this messiness of humanity. And I mean, you know, so is that something that we can academically study, messiness, Peter?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because yeah, if we let's say if I go back to one of the qualities, let's take intelligence. for sake of the argument. And then, of course, one of the metaphors is like, oh, we're rational agents, right? So we need to make a decision and we need to weigh the options, and then we pick the option that gives us the best, whatever, the best outcome. Yeah. But we all know that people are not, behaving like that. We're not rational agents. The way if we have two equivalent choices that that people need to make, the way we frame that the particular choice. Yeah. For instance, there's this bias of this mechanism of loss aversion. We hate to lose something. Yeah. So if I frame it more in terms of a loss, then I'll probably go for that particular option, even if both choices are actually the same. So that kind of proves from a psychological perspective that we are not rational agents in the sense of that we're weighing different options and picking the best one. Doesn't mean that you can't study it or that it's unpredictable. Like Dan Ariely calls it like that we're predictably irrational. Yeah, so we're using other biases and heuristics that kind of explain how we make our decisions. Yeah, and thankfully so, because it's not just limitations of humans. It actually allows us to maybe make decisions much quicker. We don't need to have an LLM in our head with hundreds of billions of parameters to just make a quick decision whether to have eggs for breakfast or something else. But we can still study it. But that's an example where I don't know like where you were going necessarily with messiness, but that's an example where there is messiness in the sense that we are not rational agents, but it doesn't mean that we can't that our behavior is still kind of unpredictable. We just use very different ways of making decisions than the simple computer.
And maybe I can add to it, Minter, that the whole life is a messy business, right? And so even if we can research messiness through pattern recognition and so on, we ourselves, the scientists, are also particularly messy in what we do. And so I'm also wondering, where do you want to go with that messiness? Because isn't it just an inherent part of life and of experiencing?
So where I land in this thought, I write about 4 major paradoxes that I think characterize the challenge of life, and specifically the challenge of life in business, and because that's a big portion of our lives. So, and one of them is the need for order. As human beings, we and certainly scientists, we're looking to make sense of things, including messiness. But as much as we are trying to impose or create order and understanding, categorizing of things and putting them in boxes, there's chaos. And as certainly the quantum theory would suggest, it is an endemic piece of our lives in dealing with the shit and the craziness, and I would characterize it in much more laic terms, messiness, which is the chaos. So that's sort of where that's where my mind wobbles, and all of this comes back to being relevant when all 3 of us also have a relationship with businesses that are run by, let's say, deeply rational, performance-led type of people. And I don't want to make any more generalizations than that, but that struggle with things like imperfection, emotions, and messiness. And so I mean, it feels like it's such a necessary part of us, what we're doing, but then we always want to codify it and put some boxes and numbers on stuff and measure it. So that's sort of what I was curious about. Any reactions, Peter?
Yeah, I feel your pain. That's one. Second, like I do think that we indeed, let's say in business we're trying to simplify and bring things back to simple KPIs, or if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But on the flip side, there's these things where people say the moment you introduce a metric, it becomes meaningless. And so, but I do think you can also, quote, model at different levels. So if we say, let's take a marketing example, right? So the old way of doing marketing is to say that, like, people with green hair and blue eyes, they're going to get product X, right? So very kind of top down, coarse-grained rules, whatever, like very simple model of the world, not even based on any level of feedback, whether this is something truly relevant to a customer or not. A much lower level of well, and then the chaos, of course, is that customers are different, right? So every customer is a segment of one, and then even for a single customer, circumstances could change overnight. If I lose my handset after a couple of beers out in a pub, or my credit card gets stolen, I'm a completely different Peter. But you can actually use that chaos by saying, well, let's not try to impose our model on the world of, let's say, simple models of what's relevant for a particular customer. But let's interact with customers and learn, in this case with AI, what are the things that would resonate with a particular client in a particular circumstance. So that's a very kind of practical example where you're actually using the chaos. It's not real chaos, because it's actually the reality of how customers behave. And you're leaning into it, and you're actually learning from it. But in that case, that does require that we're no longer just using kind of the rules and intelligence in our head, but that we also start to leverage, AI, for example, to do that really at that fine-grained single customer level.
I want to park that thought and keep it for later. But I want to sort of circle back down and lean into the notion of empathy. I have neither empathy or AI as any specialization in the background, and yet do I feel linked into it. And in the fear component, the other F, Peter, there's certainly a lot of people that fear that robots are going to take over my job, much less the world. And what allows me to keep my job? And so there is a string of words that people use that include things like creativity, intuition, abstract reasoning, consciousness, and empathy as being, like a value-added proposition that the human being somehow naturally has. And then so if we say that it is a natural component of the human being as well as animals, as you said, Lidewij, I want to quote it. I wanted to quote some work that you've written with your co-founder of Empathic Intervision, Catherine Train. In an article in Psychology Today, you wrote, empathy has many definitions, and even within one field of study, they're far from consistent. With increasing interest, empathy has become an umbrella term for many processes of shared experiences. And I think we probably, all three of us, share a frustration with the vagary and the lack of a strong definition of empathy. So do you think there's a way for us to tighten it up and create a singular, strong, not some sort of paragraphs long definition? But if you had to tackle that, Lidewij, where would you start in trying to creating an original, like the meta, the first definition of what is empathy?
Well, thank you for that question, Winter. Well, I really, so I think we need to do justice to the fact that empathy is many things. And it's not because empathy is many things, it's because empathy encompasses many different skills, ways of interacting, ways of tuning into other people. And so, yes, I have been frustrated with the fact that empathy is such a vague, messy term, and has been for basically probably ever since the beginning of the coinage of the term empathy, right? So we're talking about 70s of the last, not the last century, the one before. So it's been a messy all the way along. But what I think what is really the center of being empathic is holding space. And so this is something that I've been using more and more over the past few years, saying empathy is many things while holding an experiential space for others. So you hold the space to tune into what is happening with the other, whether it's human, whether it's animal, but maybe whether it's artificial intelligence. But maybe for now, for the sake of, let's stick to human. So holding that experiential space and then making use of those many skills that you require when you try to empathize, which is feeling into, you're using your felt sense, right? You're using your body, you're using non-verbal communication, you're using perspective taking. So you use your mind, you use imagination. So there's many different ways of tuning into what the other is trying to express or is being, is. And so in all of that, I think what empathy is really about is holding that space. So not projecting, not concluding, not judging, not running away with what the other person is expressing, but just staying with it for now, staying with it, absorbing. And then the second thing, so holding space. And the second thing I always say is empathy is a means to an end. So that also defines what empathy is in the situation, which is, what are you using it for? Why are you empathizing? What is the purpose of your empathy? And in defining that, you know, psychopaths use empathy for very different reasons than therapists do, or than we do in our intimate relationships. So if you have an idea of the end to which you're using it, you can also become more skillful in what you're actually using to tune into.
And just to be clear, in that intentionality, you're not necessarily saying it has to be good.
No.
To the extent that what you're doing is you're defining, or you're asking for people to define what is the end you are trying to achieve, without saying it has to be for good.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's neutral. The skill is not inherently good or bad. It's not inherently good or bad. It can be used for good, can be used for bad. Or, you know, there's been a lot of discussion with Paul Bloom over the past decade, who was saying, oh, empathy is bad. You know, it's not the empathy that is bad. It's what are you using it for? What's the end? What is it a means for?
Love it. Peter.
Yeah, no, I agree with many of these things. So ultimately, it's what you use it for, what makes it good or bad. Yeah, what makes it some evil persuasion versus being very kind of a good empathetic, let's say, person or system. I love it how you were saying it's a tuning into the other, right? So. And that requires, IQ, some form of intelligence to understand what the other wants, but that's not enough. You know, it also requires maybe something like an EQ, so that you can lean into these. That's why I liked it when you said, well, you need to feel the other almost, or on the flip side, you do need to understand the other person's emotions. But what sets apart them more towards, you were saying, the objective is important. what do you use it for? And I think that kind of leads towards the biggest, let's say, expectation that people have of something else or someone else. It's not just that they intelligently understand us or that they feel what our emotions are, but the biggest expectation that we have is a bit of a moral. It is a bit of a moral expectation, right? So if you're interacting with me, are you doing that for, let's say, the right purposes, right? So, and I think that sets the part, let's say the sociopath, who has a very high IQ, very high EQ, but is using that, let's say, empathy for, let's say, only it's his or its own purposes, right? So versus really deliver on the moral expectation, like are you doing what's right for, let's say, both of us here? Yeah. So, and I think that's the biggest, when you just would walk into the street and ask a random person, say, well, what does empathy mean to you? Is to put yourself into someone else's shoes. But what does it mean? That's in the category of don't do to others what you don't want to have done to yourselves or something like that. So there's a base intelligence expectation. Actually, I agree, like the emotional expectation is even more important. But the biggest or key expectation that people have is the moral expectation.
Yeah. Can I? Yeah, it's interesting because this, yes, definitely that moral expectation plays a big role. At the same time, it's quite limiting when you say empathy is putting yourself into another person's shoes. In psychology, we distinction self-perspective and other perspective, right? So if you put yourself into their shoes, you're still thinking about how would I or what would I in those shoes. While if you really want to expand, and I think that is one of the purposes that interests me most in empathy, if you really want to expand your perception of the world, your thinking, your way to connect, then you really want to absorb something foreign from the other, right? Something that you do not necessarily, maybe not even recognize, something that is not part of who you are. And that's where you start expanding. And I'm not sure that it's always necessarily moral in that sense, but it is maybe again. No, it's not. No, I'm not saying this. Sorry.
No,
it's good, but I agree. It's not about projecting yourself onto the other. It's about projecting the other on the other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, projecting, observing.
Just even projection is maybe that has a negative connotation, but for sure, it's not projecting yourself on the other.
Yes, projecting absolutely.
The other on the other, on purpose, I'm using a formulation which is not quite right, but
it's great. And so learning something from the otherness of the other, right?
Yeah.
That sounds like othering.
Yeah, sounds like othering.
Tricky. So let me contextualize some thoughts that I have as I'm listening to this. So in the one hand, we're looking at the intention and not specifying good or bad, which I would argue would be more ideological approach to empathy. And then the idea of, well, what are you trying to do? And you could sort of, and in Peter's world with Pegasystems, the idea of making my customer relationship management AI better at interacting with, having more meaningful conversations with customers in order to get to the heart of what they want, in order to serve them better. That seems like a pretty good intention, not necessarily moralistic, but it has a capitalistic anyway underneath that. Of course, you might start getting into a little bit splitting of hairs. And I'm not saying just selling shampoos, but let's say when you move from selling shampoos to selling cigarettes or selling guns. And so, you have a capitalistic intention that's good for shareholders. And I feel like the ethics needs to be brought into question. But I wanted to ask you, Lidewij, and Peter, for you to bounce on this afterwards. Is for me, there's the intention of the emitter. That's to say, the person who is attempting to be empathic with some other being, typically, right? Or, you know, it could be an animal, it could be a human being and all that. But the receptor of that empathy may or may not be aware of the intention or even the empathy as it stands. For example, I could be looking at somebody through a mirror or a mirrored window, let's say. They don't see me, I see them. And I could be, I think, trying to be empathic because I'm holding a space where I'm understanding what they're doing, but they don't even know that I'm observing them.
Yeah.
I wonder, is that ever a space called empathy?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. So that's actually what I wasn't going to say just now before, is that because in my reasoning there, I came to the conclusion, so it's also inherently self-serving, huh? And this is what happens here if you have a mirrored glass in front of you, then your empathizing is a self-serving practice in the sense that it's definitely not benefiting the other in that moment. It might, though, afterwards. Depends on what you're aiming to do with empathizing with somebody in another room that isn't seeing you.
So the specific example I wanted to mention was doing market research, where you might have a bunch of customers sitting around a table being monitored or moderated by somebody. And you, as the marketer in the background, are just observing what's going on. And if you can apply empathic understanding, then you might end up with a better shampoo bottle that doesn't slip in the shower because my hand always gets slippery, she said in the market research. So it's a rather delayed understanding of that person, that marketing team, that company was being empathic with me because, oh, well, I'm in the shower now and slippery
it's
hands.
Not slipping.
It doesn't slip anymore. So I don't know if I can ever, as the receiver, actually understand that empathy was actually emitted. So I wanted to just, Peter, what do you think about that? And how, because in your work with Pega, I'm thinking that this must be a part of your conundrums because you're always dealing with asynchronous communications. You send out a message, try to be as empathic as possible. It's received at a certain time at, you know, in another context. And that's part of CRM issues and trying to be empathic in the way you communicate.
So for that reason, actually, you know, like we focus a lot about, you know, on interaction in the moment, you know, like not just like the typical kind of whatever marketing stuff where you're harassing people with emails, but really, let's say, leave it more to the customer when they want to engage with you, and at that point in time, being more contextually relevant. I agree that the empathy can be there without, like, let's say, having an immediate impact, but ultimately, let's say, more from a customer point of view, I will only feel that empathy, if it has some form of consequence, right? So, I think it's also good to, that you don't just try to be smart, but actually that you also act. Let's say I'm making a certain. I open up my mobile banking app and I'm getting some smart recommendation around whatever my credit card points are going to expire, or I'm getting an overdraft fee if I don't put some more money in my current account, or I can save some money if actually, you know, I'm paying for my kids to have to go to cultural classes, and I can actually get money back from the government. Now, anyway, you can imagine that we could make all kinds of smart recommendations. I think it's also important not just to to make the recommendation, but to also give some element of, but how did we get to this actually? You know, like making the empathy sometimes a bit more explicit. Yeah, in this example, when we're giving smart AI recommendations, that there is a reason why we're doing it, you know, like so that you can make that empathy, that empathy also a bit more explicit. We're not just doing it because it's January and we're telling everyone the same thing.
Well, so in there, what I'm hearing is there's the intention, and then there's also some level of transparency, which becomes all the more relevant when we talk about AI, Lidewij. How do you respond to that?
Well, definitely transparency, right? Very, very important, I think. Very important. If that's I think so far, if we're moving towards AI and empathy with this, right? I think what we really know is at the moment there's no genuine thought or feeling, right? In AI, it doesn't exist, right? So recognizing that AI empathy is functional is that means to an end, right? And being transparent and maybe even open source, to the point of being open source about how that comes to be is the way I would love to see this go forward, especially if we really want to program some sort of empathic skills into AI. We want to do the best we can. And instead of all sitting on our own little island and doing again what we've been doing over the past century in mega capitalism for a long time, namely, this is my product and I need to make the money and I'm going to keep the secrets for myself. I think opening up to a really transparent way of building and sharing, also from an ethical point of view, sharing for those who want to know how that works, seems to me like the way forward.
I'm just going to circle back with you, Lidewij, again. So what I see is that, yes, we need to understand how AI is operating, transparency in the way the decisions are brought, what type of data they're using and all this. On top of that, AI has a bandwidth, which is generally far greater, far longer, more patience and all this, if we code it correctly, than we. Yet, we tend to, I think, hold AI to a higher standard than we hold ourselves. Because if you were to ask any marketer, what are your intentions all the time? And they had to express their intentions before they give you a BOGO, buy one, get one free. I'm not so sure that that would be very effective from a customer standpoint. Oh, you're trying to screw me. I'm Gillette. I'm trying to sell you blades that you now have a life indenture to me to subscribe to my razor blades. Well, that transparency, we're not so quick to ask of ourselves, but we want to ask it of the AI. And I was wondering how you sit with that, Lidewij, and then we'll get to you, Peter.
Yeah. So again, if there's no reasoning, it's a bit strange to ask that type of question to an AI, right? If there's no reasoning, no cognition, no consciousness, then what are you trying to do? Why are you trying to sell me this knife? Or, is a very strange question to ask, because there is no answer to that other than prediction of next words, or, there is no motivation behind what we're doing. So I'm not talking about that type of interaction with AI. I'm talking about the programming. If I want to sell you an empathic AI, I think I need to be very transparent about what it is that is making this AI empathic. So what is the empathy that is programmed in? What are the principles that the AI is built on that we call empathic?
And just to finish, do you, when your studies, where you're going with your students, you talk about this idea of holding experiential space? And are you now in a mode where you're able to take that and even with all the other elements, non-conclusion, non-judging, feeling into it, are you finding that enables you to craft a brief for a coder? Because I'm sure you're not doing the coding. Because I mean, that at some level, that's where we're at. I mean, I am anyway. I'm sort of talking conceptually above. So where are you in that study and the work you're doing? And then we're going to get to you, Peter.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I'm interested in, and to make it very practical. And I think for me, I'm not sure we can build empathic AI, and I'm not even sure we want to build empathic AI, but I do definitely think that we could use AI to become much more clear about what it actually is to be empathic. And so to use AI to get our own empathy principles straightened out, right? And to use AI to remind us in human-to-human interaction, or in machine-to-human interaction, these are the things, if we want to be empathic, these are the things that we want to do. For instance, we don't want to immediately give advice. All empathic AI that I've been running into so far is particularly skillful in advising. I get a lot of advice based on very little data. The AI knows very little of me and yet is able to give me good advice straight, right? And so I find that very interesting, and I think it's really missing the point. It's not, that's not what this is about. So yeah, I'm ready. I've been thinking about, and I'm ready to really think this through with developers, because definitely that's not what I can do, right? I can't do the programming, but I can think along in terms of, if we want to program this principle, what is it actually that we're looking at programming?
Peter, where are you in this whole world?
Yeah, no, I think first and foremost, Lidewij, it's really interesting to think about what are important principles in these kind of empathic relationships, and how could we actually then actually formalize them or make sure that we can deliver on them. Of course, then they also ultimately need to be used for good purposes, not bad, but it's interesting to indeed to see how we can formalize them. I think with AI, it's maybe a little bit of a nebulous term nowadays, because people on one side, they immediately think about ChatGPT and large language models and things like that. But there's also these other forms of AI. Maybe ChatGPT, you could see it as right brain AI, creative AI. But we also have the left brain AI, which is much more about, I don't know, making predictions of, let's say, customer behavior, but also putting your own rules and policies and things on top of that would ultimately guide systems towards making decisions in terms of, oh, there's a customer service issue, what could be the problem, or a marketing interaction or a customer interaction, what could be relevant to recommend to this customer. Now, in this left brain world, I do think actually you can get quite far in being more explicit about how do you get to that, quote, automated decision in general, so that you have control as a human, but also in individual interaction, to get at least some form of automated explanation of, yeah, why a particular recommendation is being made. So certainly we are aiming to do that when we use our systems, that you can see, well, like you're getting this recommendation because such and so, yeah. And also you have then more on the enterprise side, you have control over that by balancing, what's good for the customer with maybe some entrepreneur, some corporate goals that you also need to deliver on. The other side is more the right brain creative AI. So and that's slightly more challenging, because you have these huge models, and how do you reverse engineer what they actually mean, or how do you instruct them to do the right thing? For instance, how can you instruct them to advise, I don't know the answer, right? So how to avoid that they start to hallucinate all kinds of advice which might not be relevant. Yeah. So again, one of the things that we focus on is to see if we can actually constrain that AI a bit more and say, well, thou shall only talk about whatever, self-service tips from the bank, from bank X, and not talk about anything else. And also then shut up if you don't know the answer, right? So really constrain actually the boundless creativity of the average generative AI model that you use, whether it's a GPT or Gemini or whatever, to make sure that it's a bit more modest in its answer. Yeah.
Can I ask you, Peter, does that work? Because that's what I now, with all my chatbots, I instruct them, admit when you don't know before I start any type of conversation with them. But they don't know, right? So I'm not sure what it actually is that I'm prompting them to do when I say, admit that you don't know when you do not know.
Yeah. Like at risk of getting maybe a bit too technical, but you can actually take generative AI but constrain it on a particular domain. So in the example that I gave with whatever, I lost my credit card and I want to know what I need to do as a customer, and I'm a customer with bank X, so I'm not interested in bank Y or random hallucinations of a model. We could really give it, let's say, all the self-service documentation of that bank. Of course, as a customer, I can't be bothered to look for it on the website, and I get way too many search hits, and I just want the answer. I just want the answer to my question. But what you can do then is you can say, oh, you take a particular corpus of documents here on a particular domain, in this case, all the self-service documentation of the bank, and you put a Gen AI on top of it. Yeah. And if a customer has a random question, like I lost my credit card, what do I need to do? It actually, searches through that corpus, finds documents that are, most similar, and then it's sent on to the generative AI and say, well, based on this question and these search hits, give me the answer. And if it's not in the search hits, just refrain from answering. Yeah. So I can ask it, how did I lose my credit card? And I get the bank X answer, not the bank Y answer. Yeah. I can also ask it, who's John Travolta? And it will say, I don't know. Yeah, because couldn't find it in the search results.
Yeah. Okay. So based on the database behind it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. You can so it's actually, in that sense, then using these kind of large language models more as clever reasoning and summarization and reasoning engines, as opposed to the fountain of all knowledge. Right?
Yeah. Which is actually, sorry, Minter, I'm getting very excited here. Which is actually, that in itself, I would say, is an act of empathy. I live in the southwest of France, where on an ADSL cable that is, struck by trees, and so lots of problems. And so I often have my router going off, and usually when I'm in class and things like that, lots of stress. Nowadays, when I contact that customer service, my frustration is very often that if I get people finally on the phone, which usually takes a while, then they start rummaging through their books of what to do in what situation, right? And they give me exactly what I could have found on their website. And nowadays, I just send them, please open a technical ticket. There's a problem with the line, right? And I get an immediate response. And so this is actually, I think, really an example of AI being used for empathic purposes, namely, we do not have to go through, and we also don't need to put workers through having to get all these documentation together to provide an effective answer, while the AI is so good at finding the answer straight and being succinct in helping you on.
When it's well constrained. And I love that example, because something that I like to talk about is that empathy doesn't need to be one way. That's to say, people in power, let's say a business or the boss, it's always up to them to be empathic. And yet in your approach with your ASDL supplier, you are actually being empathic with them because you're immediately going for the jugular of what you need, or at least you're not trying to make them go crazy, the poor customer service agent. I want to, in reflecting and listening on to what you said before, we've talked about intention, and you talked, Lidewij, about this idea where it gives me an answer immediately that sometimes is good, maybe not always good. And this idea of measuring, it strikes me that an area of measurement will be in what we are trying to achieve. And if we can contain what our objective is, not to hit a home run, but to hit a solid base hit, get to first base, that's what we're trying to achieve. Did I get to first base? That's not a sexual discussion, but because that's in Americans, that's how that goes. But get to first base with this customer. And if that was achieved, then we can measure the effect of the empathy, not the empathy itself.
Yes.
And I just wanted to throw in one other topic, and maybe Peter, you could reply to this, is that this notion of using empathy to create trust, as opposed to get the customer to buy a product or have a specific, more materialistic objective. How do you approach that in your work as an academician or with Pega?
Yeah, that's a good question. I might address both, right? So more from the business point of view. Yeah, like I'm sticking maybe to that same kind of bank or making relevant recommendations example. I mean, this has broader implications across different things you would like to do as a business. But it's important then that, let's say, if I stick to that bank example, it's important that you are not there just to flog bank products at customers and try to make an immediate buck in this conversation. Trying to sell you this new credit card, right? So you really would need to take an approach where you look at your strategic vision. Like I don't know, one of our clients is they say it's all about enhancing and securing the financial well-being of our clients. Yeah. So as a customer, you go a little bit like yeah. But the key point, of course, people go like that because they don't always. Either you don't behave like that or you don't feel it like that, right? So it's really important then that you make that felt in every single interaction, and that these recommendations that you give, that you select them from a very wide library, not just like trying to sell you something, but also dealing with all kinds of service issues, or even proactively delight you with fixing issues before they arise, or maybe even talking about things that have nothing to do with your own products and services, but that have everything to do with your mission statement. In this example, if we nudge our clients towards government benefits, that will help ensure their financial well-being. Yeah, I'm not selling them a banking product, but I am enhancing their financial well-being. Yeah, and this way, and if you do that then in such a way that it's not this simple rule that you spoke about, like some top-level rule, but something that has a high IQ, a high EQ. It's very personalized in the moment. It's balancing what's good for the customer. It's not just what's good for the bank to really decide on what to talk about, and also to listen and take the feedback of these clients into account. Like, do they ignore it? Do they hate it? Do they like it? Learn from that as well. And then you're operating in an let's say in a more empathic mode. Yeah. Like in my research, I was looking at empathy in different types of ways as well. Like we are looking at. I spoke about the right brain AI. Like doing a project with my colleagues at Leiden University, Max van Duin and Tom Kouwhoven, Bram van Dijk, around theory of mind. Yeah, so theory of mind is this concept: can we it's a, let's say, certain cognitive ability. We can you can test that in kids, for example, or other people if you give them small stories where they need to be able to take the perspective of someone else, for example. And you can actually, interesting enough, that ability arises when kids get when kids get older, they get better at this theory of mind. We're doing research where we're looking at like what if we give these stories to these large language models? How do these models perform? Yeah. And is that just a function of that these stories and tests are out there on the internet? Or if we create new ones, do they still do a good job? Or if we make them increasingly more difficult, do they still do a good job of that perspective taking? Yeah. We're not making any ontological statements that the AI has gone sentient here, but it is interesting to actually study that. Yeah. Or on the flip side, we do want to warn for over-reliance on the AI. You know, like we're looking at conformance. When do people conform to an AI assistant, even if the AI assistant might not be, you know, giving you the most empathic or intelligent, smart recommendations. Maybe it's just trying to fool you. Yeah, it is important to understand that. Yeah, we are actually, like I said, like we're hardwired to project, we're actually also quite hardwired to conform, even if it's peer pressure, not from humans, but from, let's say, machines or robots. So we're also researching that, yeah, like the way you frame an AI, what is the impact on conformance to that AI, even if the AI gives you the wrong advice. Or research we did with student Donna Scheuter was around the form factor. What's the impact of the form factor on conformance? She looked at conversational assistants, just text versus robotic voice versus a very human sounding voice. And we could see that the human sounding voice led to way higher levels of conformance. Yeah, that's not good or bad on its own, but it's important to know. Yeah, that people behave like that. You're on mute.
Peter, you're muted.
My brain was whirring. Maybe you could see my whirring. Yeah, I wanted to just circle back to this notion of trust and getting the data, because if you want to have empathy, generally you need to understand the other person's context. In order to get that context, you generally need to have access to the information that's behind the context. And I wanted to throw in this other piece, which is, it strikes me in our divisive society that there are plenty of people that don't trust other people. And those same people might also trust more a machine. Even if, as your point, Peter, it may not give me the right answer, but I might have a bias towards a machine, that it might listen to me better, hold my space better, have less bias better than human beings. And so, I mean, whether from a psychologist standpoint, from your empathic intervention standpoint with businesses, or in your study, Lidewij, I know this is kind of vast, but where do you think we can go with making or encoding empathy into a machine, where we know we need to develop trust, get the data, we need to have transparency to say who we're doing, what our intentions are? Do we need to have all of these elements encoded before we can create an empathic being?
Do we? Well, I'm not sure I'm overseeing the vastness of this question, Winter. It's huge, right? So yes, I think we do. So the things you name here, I think we do, but I think we need to build it one by one, right? So there's many levels of principles, probably, of coding that you want to get into in order to, before you start getting into interaction with human beings, right?
All right. What sort of principles? Let's talk about the principles. I think that if we could land on or end on these principles that we need to start focusing in on
Yeah.
to avoid not being avalanched by, as you describe, this ton of questions. Go for it.
Well, so I think the one thing that Peter was also mentioning, the one thing that we really need to build into it before anything else probably is this capacity to listen. And it's almost like we think because we're prompting, so we can't be interrupted by the AI. They can only, but only when we press enter can we at least, again, I'm sorry, I'm very chatbot oriented, within the chatbot context, right? Because that might be different for the other half of the brain type of AIs. But for now, in our interaction with AI, the listening is something that I think that we really need to program into it. And this is what I was mentioning with giving advice. It's not a good sign when an AI is giving you advice after you've been describing a very short situation, saying, I'm lonely. And the AI starts immediately with, oh, I'm very sorry for you. It must be very difficult for you to be lonely. And notice how chatty these bots are. Amazing, endlessly. Anyway, and then I would advise you to go and do this. You could try and do that. This AI knows nothing about my loneliness, nothing, right? It knows apparently something about loneliness. That is, it has a huge database about what loneliness is, but it doesn't know me. And so programming the listening into it seems like one of the principles that we really need to get very clear. And that doesn't seem to be, to me, in my fairly human brain, it doesn't seem to be too difficult, right, to program this into AIs. Peter, I see you agree.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So whatever in the left brain, it's all these machine learning systems that learn from data. Right brain, then it's a bit more challenging in the sense that typically the AI that's used, it's kind of baked already, or we don't even control it. We use whatever GPT from OpenAI or Gemini from Google. But even there can be elements of learning. You don't need to kind of retrain models. You can just keep a bit more of context of what have we discussed so far, and maybe indeed being AIs, being the stupid AIs that they are, do more of a job of playing back, like, okay, so you told me all these things. This is what I understood. Is that correct? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Right. So I do agree with you. We shouldn't use AI to put mansplaining on steroids, right? So, or AI splaining, if you wish. So I think the art of listening, that's certainly something we need to build into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then it sounds like it's the art of listening, also of reformulating and asking questions to probe, and knowing that we also have to worry about, well, I might have endless amount of bandwidth and microprocessing power and memory up in the cloud, but you, Peter, live in a 24-hour day. And by gum, I want the answer. That's another F word, within, a certain number of minutes, because I have to go pick up my kid. And so that first principle, as I'm understanding it from you, is this art of listening and probing and reformulating to make sure that I understand.
Mm.
Is there a second principle that comes to mind?
Mm. Peter, do you want to give it a try first?
Yeah, good one. I like it. At the beginning, I was talking a bit about having, talking more like as the receiver of the empathy, right? What do I expect of the other? Yes, the other should have a high IQ so that they can understand what I'm saying. Yes, they should be able to lean into my feelings, but I do have the moral expectation, right? So somehow we need to make sure that we can, especially if we build AI systems that are supposedly to not just be smart, but also emotionally intelligent, but they also need to be able, we need to be able to reflect certain values into that system and somehow work that into these interactions that we're having, and being also explicit, at least to some degree, and transparent about what those values are. Yeah, and yeah, of course, you need to you do need to do what's right for the customer or the citizen. Of course, there's also objectives that whatever the government organization has or the company has that you're interacting with, but at least it's good to be somewhat see if we can make that somehow a bit more explicit, so that these things are being taken into account. Yeah, and that the balance can be made, that it's not just the user of the AI systems whose needs are being met.
If I may just reformulate what I heard, Peter, and then I want you to lean in, Lidewij, before we close off. What I heard there is that we need to, as a group, before we even really start to encode, we need to, as a group, understand what are our values and what is our strategy, what are our intentions behind this whole effort. And as a group, including our marketing team, our coders, our agency, our sales, everybody, have a sort of a consistency with regard to what is our, as you talked about a little bit more, the moral ambition that we have within this, that we all share, so that the machine can be an accurate reflection of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And then, of course, there's some everyday realism that is part of that, because whatever, if it's a business, I don't mind that my bank is profitable, you know, like I understand that they need to be a business and hit certain goals, but in a particular interaction, they need to balance what's good for them and what's good for me as well, right? So it's important to indeed to be clear on, yeah, on those values, yeah, and typically, actually, they already exist. You know, it's written down in some kind of annual report, but they're not always living up to it, right? So if you can really build it into the, you know, the fine-grained interactions that you have with your millions of customers, and but be true to it, yeah. I think that's yeah. Then that's a good thing, yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to get to you, Lidewij, but it does sound like we go back to the initial idea, which is that the work on encoding maybe empathy into AI has a greater benefit and reflection back onto who we are, because it makes us sit in on, well, we've written these 3 values. Well, what the heck do we mean by them in our annual report? Let's talk about that and embody them first within us before we even start to try to replicate it. Lidewij. And do you have any other principles that we're missing out? I mean, if we can land on you know, like 2 or 3 principles, I'd be very excited.
Yeah, okay. So, well, you know, with age advancing, I get more and more simplistic in life. And I think this one thing, the one thing that we need to do is maybe, yes, okay, we've got business values and got strategy and we got vision and we all agree with it, but we don't, but this is who we are. And we can spend lots of time spending lots of money and lots of brain power together on, you know, what do we stand for? This is our persona. This was what we want to build into before we start coding. But again, the aim of empathy, you know, empathy as a means to an end, I think each and every Gen AI application in whatever way is a means to an end. And so the empathy here is really about what is the end? And if we know the end of this application, what do we actually want to do with this application? If we know the end, then let's reason back to what do we need to build into it. So I think that's really how I see it more and more. And so keeping in mind that we're building tools, right? Tools that help us to perform, to understand, to synthesize data. I am really excited about AI because I've got a very messy brain. It's a big sieve, and you know, I never know if I'm going to remember what brilliant thought I had 5 minutes ago. So having that AI behind me that is pumping that data, right, and is able to help me to make sense, I think it's great. So that's the first thing. One of the other principles that I think we really need to build into AI, in the world of empathy, we're still very often discussing only 2 types of empathy, namely cognitive empathy and emotional empathy, right? And I strongly disagree with the principle of having cognitive and emotional empathy, and even with the idea that these are two different things. But in terms of programming, I think it's very important that the emotional empathy, so the understanding emotions, if we want to build empathic AIs, whatever that's going to look like, understanding human emotions, if it interacts with humans, I think is real basic principle that needs to be met. And we can do that. We have like the facial action coding system, FACS, that was started by Paul Ekman, and is now Erica Rosenberg's doing a lot of work on that. We, you know, we can recognize emotion in the face with a very high predictive accuracy, right? So AI can recognize emotions in all sorts of ways. I think that building that into AI that pretends to be empathic seems another basic principle that I think we should look at. But the means to an end is, I think, the most important thing, because we're spending lots of time on maybe not that interesting visioning, you know, company personas.
So
Yeah, I think it's important to, like you say, to operationalize that ultimately into doing something. And so
Yeah.
you could say empathy is not a noun, it's a verb. You know,
Yeah.
like you need to translate all that empathy and these higher level values into doing it. Yeah. Towards certain outcomes or certain ends that you have, right? So I very much agree with that. So when I talk about these values, not just like, oh, let's sit down and you know, have these very vague high level vision sessions and not then just put it in a PowerPoint and in a drawer and not do anything with it. I really mean like operationalizing them into these AIs. Exactly. And how they behave, you know, so that they at least to some degree, you know, that we balance, you know, the needs of the customer or the stakeholder, the various stakeholders, and that we follow the certain vision that we're supposed to have, let's say, as a company. So in that sense, I think the principle of you know, for lack of a better term, empathy is not just a noun but also a verb. You need to do it. I think is a good one as well.
Yeah. And so maybe we're not holding AI up to higher standards than we hold ourselves, but maybe we could use AI to hold ourselves up to our own standards, right?
Yeah, like it's slightly off topic, but I have another kind of student who's about to graduate, Alexander Serraris. We actually did an exercise where we did this kind of checks and balances thing. We took annual reports. We used Gen AI to extract like, hey, what kind of principles are, you know, does the bank type down in its annual report as its high level principles? So first we extract those principles with Gen AI. And then, yeah, we get a little bit cheeky. We take all the a whole bunch of marketing publications that whatever the bank has on its website. And then we use the Gen AI to check these articles against the principles. Yeah. And we did that for, we built that system that can kind of more or less completely automatically do that, like extract the principles and apply them and check them. And we ran that for 3 banks. And they had overlapping principles, but also different ones. One of the overlapping principle that they all had that they were working towards a sustainable future. Well, it will be no surprise that was the least aligned to principle in the, you know, when we actually started to look at like, you know, what do these banks actually talk about? Yeah, I'm not accusing them of ill intent or anything like that, but it's an example of a creative form of research where we go from the top level, you know, fluffy vision thing down to, okay, but at least what are you communicating in your own, let's say, into your own corporate marketing? Ultimately, you want to do that all the way down into all the actions that you take as an enterprise.
Very nice. I'd love to read that when that's written up,
it's almost
Peter.
done.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Well, since time is unlimited, is not unlimited, I wanted to thank you both for a stimulating little round trip there. Obviously, probably could go on for hours more. I certainly feel like I had a few more zones I wanted to dive into, but it sounds like we have convergences in our studies, and that even though we come from very different backgrounds, we could get there. But I do feel we need to militate or and have people corral around rather than have sort of this vague understanding of it, because if it's vague, it's going to be very hard to encode a machine. So I'm gonna hopefully pull together some let's say synopsis of what we've done, and maybe it'll even turn into, thanks to Perplexity or some other Gen AI, in quicker fashion, some kind of smart production out of what we said. I will be in touch with you more. Any last words, Lidewij, for you on this topic, and anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, so no, I just really want to thank you, Minter, for having that conversation, the three of us. I found it really interesting and stimulating. And I really, we talked about this before, and maybe I just put it out in the world there, that we are looking really for the people who are willing to put their thoughts, their minds, and their resources into envisioning let's start with a Gen AI application that has some of the empathy principles in it, to see if there's something that we can build that really helps us human beings empathize more and with each other in productive ways, in whichever that is. Very much understanding that the nuclear bomb was a great invention with the disastrous consequences, right? That same thing could happen with empathy. So empathy has to be understood as not morally good in and of itself. And yet I do think it's very important that we keep on building our empathic skills, that we really need it in our human interaction, if with the right intentions. And that, so we're looking for people who are interested in getting this out, trying this out, and in the most transparent way possible.
And how can they reach you, Lidewij?
They can reach me through our website, and that is empathicintervision.com. They can reach me through email, through LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I'm very active, so very welcome to find me on LinkedIn, and we'll drop an email somewhere in the notes.
Indeed, I'll put all that in the show notes. Hey, Peter, your turn.
Well, like I'm for sure maybe the first person that would like to accept that offer, because that sounds really interesting. Yeah. No, and I think in general, like I think with all these kind of high-tech things like AI, it's always interesting. It's very useful to start with the human perspective and then branch off from there. I think hopefully this conversation was also kind of a proof point of that. Yeah, and that's both very much aligned with how I think about it in applying it more, let's say, in the business world. Like I did write a short manifesto about what are the responsible ways to use AI. So if you go, well, that's maybe if I can do a short commercial. If you go to pega.ai, you will find that manifesto. But also like people want to know more about these different lines of research. Just Google me, and you'll find the research that we're working on at university, and always open to collaborations there as well.
Yeah, both of you are not just friendly, you're Google friendly. Both of you have sufficiently findable names. Hey, listen, many thanks. I'll put all those, I'll collect those show notes elements for you to make sure everyone can grab you wherever and however, so we can progress this little world that we're living on. Hey, listen, many thanks. Vele danke. I think that's something like that, right?
Something like it, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.